just a couple more minutes, folks. We'll let some late people come in. All right, everyone. Hello. Welcome to this informal stakeholder Zoom meeting that we have scheduled today to talk about an upcoming plan change request that DOE we are expecting to be provided in early 2024. I just wanted to go ahead and thank you all for joining as I admit a couple other folks. As you can see in the room, we have a number of familiar faces for many of you. I'm Ray Lee, working in the Radiation Protection Division, Center for Radiation Information and Outreach, and we can just go around real quickly.
Hi, I'm Lee Beal, the Director for Radiation Protection Division.
Shelley Laver, the Center Director for Radiation Information and Outreach.
Tom Peak, the Director for the Center for Waste Management and Regulations.
Joe Rustick, Staff Scientist, Center for Waste Management and Regulations.
John Major, geologist in the Center for Waste Management and Regulation.
And Xu Tong here, physical scientist in Tom's Center.
And I'm Jay Santillan, also a geologist here, Center for Waste Management Regulations.
So I think what we're going to do, first of all, can everybody hear me okay? If you can, please go ahead and raise your hand, and we will try and speak louder if we can. Bill, can you not hear us?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. We can hear you.
Okay, gotcha. So how this is going to go, we wanted it to be very informal and very similar to how we've done these types of meeting in the past. So we are going to have a brief intro from us. Then we're going to turn over the floor to DOE, let them give what they have right now in terms of the PCR and what we can expect. And then we're just going to open the floor to questions. And I'll just go ahead and, in terms of, ground rules, I know that a lot of you have been participating in these informal meetings, not only with us, but also with DOE. So once the question, I would really ask that you save your questions for the question and answer session. And the team here will be monitoring the chat. If you have something that you'd like to ask, just please raise your hand so that we can, identify you. And then if you'd rather ask the questions in chat, that's fine as well. But if you'd like to, speak and within, Zoom, just raise your hand and we will, call on you and you can do your thing. So with that, why don't I go ahead and pull up our presentation. Can everybody see the presentation? Great. Okay, so go ahead.
It looks like the presentation being presented is just,
Oh, that's interesting. Share. Must be.
I can see it.
Yeah.
It might be.
Can you see it now?
Oh, yeah, it's good.
Okay. Okay.
You may have somebody in the way.
I made you a co-host. Do you think you can admit this? Sorry, we have some people coming in late. It's me? Rick, what is going on here?
I don't see anybody being admitted.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so why don't we get started? Like I said, this meeting is to, just for some background, DOE is proposing to add a couple of new panels, 11 and 12, to the existing WIPP repository. NMED has approved panels as part of their operating permit. That was done in October of this year. DOE, with their PCR, they must ensure that the repository will continue to meet EPA's radioactive waste disposal standards with the new panels. And DOE is going to demonstrate this through the official plan change request, which, like I said, is going to be submitted sometime in early 2024. The purpose of this meeting, again, we got some input from some of you that you'd like to have a preliminary meeting to discuss the upcoming PCR and what the agency's review process would look like. So we are doing that today. DOE is going to be presenting a very general, high-level overview of what we can expect, what you can expect when the official PCR comes in. And I know it's a very general overview, but we wanted to just get some early feedback from the public, from what you see today. And as far as the structure, like I said, we wanted to keep this informal and on a smaller scale. It's an open discussion. We want to hear any thoughts or questions or things that you all are anticipating or looking for in the PCR when it comes in. And, we wanted to, given that we've had a relationship with many of you, most of you, throughout our oversight program, we wanted to treat this kind of like a focus group and give you an early preview, like I said. And once you get that, you could take this information, disseminate it amongst your groups and constituents and partner stakeholders back in New Mexico and your communities. And then, once the official PCR comes in, you guys will have hit the ground running, so to speak. So that was really what we wanted to do here today. And as far as the follow-up after this meeting, we will make sure that any presentations, both ours and DOE's, will be uploaded on the WIPP website, as well as a recording of this Zoom meeting. It is being recorded, so we will put that up as soon as that's available on our WIPP website. And then following the official submission of the PCR, we will hold larger scale in-person meetings in New Mexico, likely in Carlsbad and one in Carlsbad and one in northern New Mexico, sometime in the spring of 2024 after the PCR comes in and both you and the agency has had some time to take a look at it. At this point, I will go ahead and turn it over to Jay.
Thanks. So I'll just give a couple background slides for you all. As a quick refresher, as you can see in the images on the right, here are the kinds of waste that goes into the WIPP. WIPP consists of contaminated, or waste that goes into the WIPP consists of debris waste, contaminated lab equipment, and other items from the manufacture and cleanup of atomic weapons. One of the new things that we'll be dealing with is also the addition of surplus plutonium that's been down blended.
Jay, mind just a sec. Do you think you can admit? There are a couple people that have entered the waiting room. We're just going to try and admit them real quick.
John's gonna try it.
I need to make you a co-host.
It's like under participants, I don't see. Is it under participants?
Yeah, it's participant list that's at the top.
Yeah, I don't have anything listed on mine. It's people to admit.
Yeah, so we can make it.
Yeah. Zoom.
The recording has stopped.
Yeah. Well,
Well, it's not showing up in the.
right. And now the entire. Yeah. I can't seem to get the Zoom, like where.
Maybe click on this one.
There we go.
Okay. So yeah, I guess we can go on the next one.
You can. Yeah, you can restart the recording, John. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so also as a refresher, our primary role at the WIPP is for the oversight of the radioactive portion of the waste. So that includes making sure that DOE is complying with our regulations that's set in parts 191 and 194. Part of this work also involves certifying and recertifying the WIPP, the most recent recertification happening in 2022. New Mexico regulates the hazardous waste portion of this waste. So this upcoming plan change request falls under the oversight activities that we do. So here is an overview of our review process. So the first step that we do once we get the application is to do some sort of completeness review. So this means that we'll be comparing the submission of this PCR to the last submission, which will be the CRA 2019. We'll look at things like what's changed, what new information has come out, changes in parameters that DOE has used for their performance assessment calculation. And then we look at how these data, all the new data have been incorporated into their performance assessment. During this process, we'll also have a lot of back and forths with DOE to get more documentation, try to clarify more information if we have any questions, and then potentially ask them for calculations if we need more information. We also will be holding public meetings as well, as you heard from Ray. And then once we deem the application is complete, then we begin to draft and finalize our supporting documents that support whatever decision we make, and all these documents will be made public. So we will hear more about this from DOE shortly, but like we said, we do expect to see DOE to submit a plan change request for the addition of 2 new panels, which are circled in red. These panels are going to replace lost space in panels 9, 1, and 7, which became inaccessible due to the incident in 2014. So, and this is going to happen sometime in 2024. So the main question we're going to be asking, or one of the main questions we'll be asking when we're reviewing this plan change request, is whether this is going to be a significant departure from the most recent recertification, which happened in 2019. So depending on what we do and what we determine, we'll either be doing a rulemaking, or an administrative review. But whatever we choose to do, we will also be soliciting feedback from the public.
So just to wrap up, kind of summarizing what Jay said, we have a couple of options. If EPA decides that the panels are a significant departure and we need to conduct a rulemaking, we will go ahead and do that. I know some of you are familiar with rulemakings. We did one in the early 2000s for the 194 revisions. So there will be a proposed rule with an official public comment period, public hearings, and then there will be a final rule announcing the final determination. So as I said, that will include required official steps, Federal Register notices, official public comment periods, and public hearings. If we decide that the panels are not a significant departure after looking at the plan change request when it comes in, we will conduct an administrative review, as we have done similarly with other plan change requests, such as when DOE submitted their PCR for the MGO mini SACs. It'll be a shorter process than a rulemaking, but the reason why we wanted to kind of highlight this PCR and have these meetings is it's still likely to be more complex than some of the previous changes. We will, as soon as we get the official PCR, we will post it on the WIPP website and send an email to the WIPP News listserv as well. And then open an unofficial public comment period, which is essentially, we make everything publicly available to you. If there are any comments, questions, issues that you have, go ahead and send them to us. It's just that there will be no official docket that is created specifically for this action, which happens every time a federal agency publishes a Federal Register notice. So it's more of just an informal process, although the steps are very similar. Like I said, there will be public comment. We will have public meetings. It'll just be in a more informal setting. And yeah, just as a final note, all documentation will be docketed in regulations.gov and posted on our WIPP website, if you are familiar with our WIPP News page. So that is all we have. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to DOE. And Andy, Michael, who do you want me to give co-hosting rights to?
I'll give there's Andy. I'll give the introduction. Then I believe the SMEs will probably control their own slides. So
Okay.
There's Karen Day and Sarah Brunel from Sandia. Is that okay, or?
Yeah, that is totally fine. Thank you, Andy. So you said Sarah?
Sarah
And
Brunel
Dave.
from Sandia and Karen Day from LADA will give presentations. Do you see them there? I have the presentation, so if it's a problem, we could probably host them. I could.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I have made you a co-host, Andy, so you can go ahead.
Okay. So my name is Andy Ward. I'm the Compliance Certification Manager for DOE. Just a brief introduction for today's meeting. First, I'd like to thank Ray and the EPA in general for coordinating this meeting. We thank the stakeholders for participating. As Ray mentioned and as Jay mentioned, this is about a plan change request for two panels 11 and 12 that will replace lost capacity, lost disposal capacity at WIPP. The regulations require us to submit a plan change request. We've done a lot of work to put this plan change request together. meeting all the regulatory requirements, as well as some expectations that the EPA has expressed. I know that some of these expectations echo some expectations from the stakeholders. So what you're going to see today will be two presentations. One from Karen Day at Los Alamos Technical Associates, a contractor to Simcoe, that will give a brief overview of the format and the content of the PCR. And then we have Sarah Brunel from the Sandia National Lab Carlsbad Program Office that will give a sort of an overview of the performance assessment calculations that were done and what changes have ensued from the last recertification decision. So are you
Here we go. Andy, are you still talking?
is it
Here.
to have Karen be a co-host so they can put the slides on? Otherwise, I would have to pull them up.
Sure.
Yes, this is Karen Day. Ray, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great.
Karen, I am making you a co-host.
Okay.
Second. All right, you should be good to go.
Good.
Very good. Okay. All right, can everybody see my screen okay?
Yeah, but you need to go to presentation mode.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought that's what I was in. Is it showing up too large?
It's not in presentation mode. It's in edit mode. If you have a double monitor, you may have to choose the screen that you're sharing.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, Karen, it's just that we see the preview of the slides on the left. So it's not like full.
Okay. Right. Bear with me just 1 second.
Sure.
Okay. Right. Is that better, Anderson?
Nothing has changed, but we probably should get started.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's not, what you're seeing is not showing up on my screen. So, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Karen Day. I'm the project manager for EPA compliance with Los Alamos Technical Associates. And as Anderson explained, I'll be giving everyone a brief overview of the plan change request for the use of replacement panels 11 and 12. So this slide just highlights the outline of the replacement panels plan change request that I'll refer to hereafter as the RPPCR. And the DOE is planning to submit this RPPCR to the EPA in the near future. There's a brief introduction that provides a summary of the contents of the RPPCR, and then the main sections of the RPPCR include waste disposal panel design and transuranic waste volume capacity limits, basis for the plan change request.
Karen, just 1 second.
Yes.
It looks like You may be sharing a different screen because the slides are not moving. We're still on the introduction, like the title screen.
All right. Let's see. Anderson, I may need to get the folks at Sandia to share their screen and do the advancing for me.
Karen, if you'd like, I can do that for you.
Okay. Sarah, would you mind pulling that up and starting on slide 2, please?
Yeah, so Sarah, you're already a co-host. So Karen, you can go ahead and stop sharing. And
okay. Oh, stop share. It's right here. Okay.
Can you see that okay?
Yes, I can. Go ahead and, if you would, go ahead and advance to slide 2, please, Sarah. Okay. Can everybody see the outline of the RPPCR?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So continuing on to the outline, after a brief introduction, there's a section entitled Waste Disposal Panel Design and Transuranic Waste Volume Capacity Limit. There's a section explaining the basis for the plan change request, and then an overview of the general design for the replacement panels 11 and 12. There are also sections on site characterization, a section that addresses the range of potential waste, and then a section that provides a summary of the performance assessment results for the analysis that was performed by Sandia National Laboratories in support of the RPPCR. There's a section addressing changes to active and passive institutional controls, and then a brief conclusion and a references section. There are 2 appendices associated with the RPPCR. The first one is the summary report for the replacement panel's plan change request performance assessment. And then there is Appendix B, which is it's entitled EPA Issues Crosswalk Table, and it ties the various issues that are outlined in or communicated from the EPA to the DOE in a June 30th, 2022 letter to those issues implementation in the RPPCR. Next slide, please. Through this replacement panels plan change request, the DOE is requesting to use replacement panels 11 and 12 such that disposal operations that are anticipated to be needed between panels 8 and 11 will be uninterrupted. And this will ensure that the DOE can continue to carry out its mission as authorized by the Land Withdrawal Act of disposing of the nation's defense-generated transuranic waste. Throughout the RPPCR narrative, there are multiple references made to EPA expectations associated with the RPPCR as outlined in an April 20th, 2021 letter from the EPA to the DOE. Next slide, please. Just by way of history, the original WIPP repository design consists of 10 panel equivalents. There are 7 disposal rooms and intake exhaust drifts in each of the existing panels 1 through 8. Panels 9 and 10 are comprised of a portion of the main access drifts and crosscut drifts, and they're located between panels 1 through 4 to the east and panels 5 through 8 to the west. And as Jay clarified earlier, this RPPCR does not impact the Land Withdrawal Act total true waste volume capacity limit of 6.2 million cubic feet. Next slide. The basis for this RPPCR is the DOE has designated replacement panels 11 and 12 as a means to recover lost disposal capacity that's been realized over the operational life of the facility thus far. In panel In panel 1, most of rooms 4 through 6 were lost due to deteriorated ground conditions that occurred between the conclusion of mining in panel 1 in the 1980s and then the ultimate commencement of waste and placement operations that didn't occur until 1999. After the events of 2014, which included both a vehicle fire and a radiological release, most of rooms 4, 5, and 6 in panel 7 were lost because of contamination and the inability to get into the underground and continue ground control activities during the recovery process. And then in 2019, the south end.
This meeting is being recorded.
In 2019, the south end portion of the repository, including all of panel equivalent 9, was closed because engineering judgment deemed it necessary to ensure worker safety. Next slide. The RPPCR contains a section describing the design associated with replacement panels 11 and 12. Just by way of summary, the design is very similar to that of the existing panels 1 through 8, except the nominal room height has been increased from 13 feet to 14 feet. There are also some minor variations in the isolation pillar, abutment pillar. Those variations are described in the PCR. Next slide. A section on site characterization has been prepared in response to the EPA's April 2021 letter. This section explains that the current P brine distribution is adequate for a 12-panel representation. There has been a recalibration of the transmissivity fields in the PA to provide more hydrological data, and refinements have been made to the Culebra transport model to account for differences in releases further to the west. Next slide. The EPA also expressed the expectation that the DOE include the full range of reasonably expected waste that may be disposed of at the WIPP facility. And more specifically, the EPA was interested in the inclusion of waste streams associated with pit production and the 34 metric tons of dilute and disposed surplus plutonium. The RPPCR PA is based on the most current documented waste inventory, and that would be the 2022 ATWER Annual Transuranic Waste Inventory Report. From the 2022 ATWER, the Performance Assessment Inventory Report, or PAIR, was derived. And this PAIR does include estimates from pit production at both Los Alamos National Laboratory and the Savannah River site. And additionally, there is an additional 7.1 metric tons of surplus plutonium that's been added to the inventory since CRA 2019 for a total of 13.1 metric tons reflected in the inventory. The remainder of the surplus plutonium inventory that's from the Savannah River site surplus plutonium disposition program is categorized in the ATWER as potential waste, and it is pending ongoing decisions associated with ongoing NEPA evaluations. I just wanted to point out too, this is reflected in the RPPCR, that the DOE, due to its strategy for random waste emplacement, does not consider a single panel being highly loaded with surplus plutonium to be a plausible scenario. Next slide, please. A performance assessment has been performed for the RPPCR to assess whether the use of replacement panels 11 and 12 would affect the DOE's continued compliance with 40 CFR 191.13, and those results will be presented next by Sandia National Laboratories. The PA analysis has been based on the anticipated WIPP repository configuration at the time of closure, and that is 19 panels in total, and that's in accordance with the EPA's 2021 letter. Also, the following conceptual models have been modified and peer-reviewed since CRA 2019. Those include the disposal system geometry, repository fluid flow, and direct brine releases. And for this RPPCR PA analysis, a final facility closure date of 2083 has been assumed. Next slide, please. This RPPCR also contains a brief section addressing how active and passive institutional controls will be impacted by replacement panels 11 and 12. And this slide provides an example of what the active institutional control perimeter fence line and roadway footprint and the passive institutional control marker system footprint would look like. Basically, continued compliance with 40 CFR 194.41 would be accomplished by extending the current active institutional control footprint over the surface expression for any added footprint, specifically for this PCR replacement panels 11 and 12. And this footprint includes barbed wire fencing, gates, and a roadway to facilitate patrolling. The current program is detailed in the Hazardous Waste Facility Permit Attachment H1, which was recently issued by the New Mexico Environment Department and became effective on November 3rd of this year. Similarly, for passive institutional controls, continued compliance with 40 CFR 194.43 would be achieved by extending the markers over replacement panels 11 and 12. The baseline PICS program was outlined in the original 1996 compliance certification application, which details a permanent marker system, and DOE is currently working with the Nuclear Energy Agency testing of PICS or passive institutional controls is currently on hold until there more concrete decisions can be made at the international level. Last slide, please. In conclusion, the results from the RPPCR PA analysis performed for replacement panels 11 and 12 has demonstrated that the DOE will remain in compliance with the radioactive waste disposal standards of 40 CFR Part 191. And that concludes my presentation. I believe this time I'll be turning it over to Sandia National Laboratories, who will be presenting the results of the PA analysis.
Okay, let me pull up my presentation and I will share that with you. Okay, are you seeing my screen and hearing me okay?
Yes. I
Okay.
see it, Sarah.
My name is Sarah Brunel. I'm a geoscientist at Sandia National Laboratories in the Performance Assessment Department, working on the WIPP project. And as was mentioned, I'm just going to go over the changes made to WIPP PA for the replacement panels plan change request. WIPP is a facility for the permanent disposal of transuranic waste. It's located in southeast New Mexico and owned by the U.S. Department of Energy. Regulatory compliance is certified by the U.S. EPA. At WIPP, defense-related transuranic waste is in place in a salt formation deep underground. It has a disposal capacity of 6.2 million cubic feet, which is set by the WIPP Land Withdrawal Act. And long-term repository performance is demonstrated using performance assessment. As was also discussed, due to operational reasons, there was some lost disposal capacity from the original 10-panel repository design, and replacement panels 11 and 12 are intended to recover that lost disposal capacity. DOE is requesting approval for those replacement panels using a plan change request. So Sandia performed a 2023 replacement panels plan change request performance assessment, the RPPCR-PA, to support that work. This analysis demonstrates the continued compliance of WIPP facility with EPA containment requirements. Even though DOE is currently only seeking approval for panel 11 and panel 12, those panels by themselves will not provide enough storage capacity for the full volume of waste authorized by the Land Withdrawal Act. So at the request of EPA, our analysis models the repository configuration as it's expected to look at the time of closure, which includes 19 panels. WIPP considers two scenarios, the undisturbed repository scenario and the disturbed repository scenario. The undisturbed repository scenario models salt creep with fluid flow and waste degradation processes. And the results of the analysis in the undisturbed scenario show that there are no releases to the accessible environment from the undisturbed repository. The disturbed repository scenario models human intrusion into the repository by inadvertent and intermittent drilling and mining. And inadvertent human intrusion is the only credible mechanism to release radionuclides to the accessible environment, and those releases are well beneath the compliance limits. For material to be considered to contribute to a release, it needs to be exposed to the accessible environment. And by regulation, that is either the ground surface or the land withdrawal boundary. There are two release pathways modeled in WIPP. One is through a borehole from a drilling, and the other is brine entering the waste area and continuing up the borehole or the shaft, either to the marker beds or to the calabria, and then out to the land withdrawal boundary. Direct releases comprise short-term releases and are the main contributor to total releases. And direct releases are cuttings, cavings, spallings, and direct brine releases, or DBRs. Cuttings and cavings are the solid material removed during a drilling event, removed from up to the surface. And spallings and direct brine releases are material introduced into the borehole due to pressure buildup in the repository. Spallings would be the solid material, and DBRs would be brine. Radionuclide transport through groundwater comprise long-term releases. So this is when brine enters the repository and migrates up the shaft or up the borehole to the marker beds or to the calabria and out to the land withdrawal boundary. We included a number of changes in our analysis in addition to the changes to the repository footprint. We have several standard updates, which are updates we make to every analysis, including the drilling rate, plugging pattern probabilities, inventory updates, which is radionuclides, but also other waste materials and packaging materials. And we updated radionuclide solubilities and their associated uncertainties. The changes that we made to accommodate the new waste panels include parameters related to the updated repository area and volume. We updated the computational grids for Salado flow and direct brine release models, and we added additional release points to the calabria transport models. These are the other changes that we made. In addition to that, we updated the thermodynamic database. We recalibrated the calabria transmissivity fields. The actinide oxidation state model is extended to accommodate actinide-specific oxidation state distributions. The Salado flow model is updated with a new model of creep closure of salt onto the waste. We have an updated Castile brine reservoir model, an updated borehole permeability parameter distribution, and an updated method of calculating the iron surface area. So this curve is the total release complementary cumulative distribution function curve, or the CCDF curve, which is the measure of compliance. So we use this curve to compare total releases to regulatory release limits. Releases are measured in EPA units, which is a WIPP-specific unit. It's defined as 10,000 EPA units of inventory at the time of repository closure. So one EPA unit is basically 1/10,000th of the inventory. At the upper compliance limit, there's less than 1 chance in 10 of exceeding one EPA unit. And at the lower release limit, there's less than 1 chance in 1,000 of exceeding 10 EPA units. We also look at those total releases. We break them down by release components. The black line in this curve is the total releases that you saw on the previous slide. The blue line is the contribution of cuttings and cavings to total releases. The red line is fallings, the green line is direct brine releases, and the purple line in the bottom left is releases from the calabria. For this analysis, cuttings and cavings were the main contributor to total releases at high probabilities, and DBRs and spallings contributed approximately equally at lower probabilities. We also performed a supplementary analysis looking at what a hypothetical 12-panel repository releases would look like. So we first took the releases from the RP-PCR analysis and broke them down by panel. So the figure on the left is individual releases from each panel. And the main takeaway from that figure is that all 19 panels behave approximately the same. There's not much difference between them. After we had per panel releases, we applied some scaling factors to take into account the differences in inventory between a 12-panel repository and a 19-panel repository. And we used that to mock up what 12-panel releases would look like. So on the right, the color scheme is the same. Blue is cuttings and cavings, red is spallings, green is direct brine releases. Solid line is the 12-panel releases, and the dashed line are the results from the RP-PCR. In this analysis, we didn't look at releases from the calabria because they are such a small contributor to total releases. But our analysis shows that there's not a significant difference in releases from this hypothetical 12-panel repository as would be from the full 19-panel repository. Compared to the CRA 2019, which was the most recent regulatory compliance submittal, the mean total releases are increased at all probabilities. These increases are mainly a result of the increase in oiling rate, the updated inventory, and the updated model for salt creek closure onto the waste. The increase that we saw is not a result of the additional panels. In summary, the WIPP facility with the replacement and additional panels with both the 12 and 19 panel repository remains in compliance with EPA containment requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Karen. I think at this point, we will go ahead and open the floor to questions from you all, the public. If you wanted to go ahead and ask your question on video, audio, please raise your hand. If you wanted to do that in chat, we will monitor the chat and answer them that way. I see Don has already raised his hand. So go ahead, Don. Is he on mute? Yeah, let me unmute you, Don. There you go.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Thank you. Presumably people know who I am, but Don Hancock, Southwest Research and Information Center in Albuquerque. So first off, thanks to EPA and to DOE for doing this. It is helpful, and there was some information that I was looking for that were included in both the EPA and DOE presentations. So that's very useful. So thanks for that. I guess I'm concerned about a couple of things. One is it doesn't seem to me that it's hard to determine that the PCR is very significant changes. It's very significant changes to the inventory, to the footprint of the facility, more than doubling the underground footprint size in the original 1998 certification, and the length of time operating the facility till 2083. So there are lots of reasons to think that this is pretty obviously a significant change. So I guess my suggestion for DOE is, insofar as they think it's not a significant change, they need to bolster that in their PCR presentation, which maybe you were planning to do it, but I didn't see it in the outline, the overview discussion. So that's a suggestion for DOE. For EPA, I think you all need to think pretty seriously about that as well, in terms of how you're going to conduct the proceeding. And I'm not opposed to what you're saying you're going to do in terms of doing informal comments and coming to New Mexico. But I think looking back as I did at your April 20th, 2021 letter regarding potential for rulemaking, it doesn't seem to me that DOE has addressed the concerns that you had there, and maybe they will in a more detailed thing. But as I say, that seems to me the basic parameters are going to fall into that significant area. I also don't agree with, at this point, how it appears that DOE is handling 12 panels versus 19 panels. On the one hand, they are admitting that they want to have at least 19 panels, but it's unclear to me what they're actually asking for. And again, this needs to be clarified in their application. If they're assuming that the EPA approval of this PCR will cover 19 panels, again, they need to describe how that's the case, because to me, that doesn't obviously seem to be the case. The flip side of that is, since they do plan for 19 panels, they're not including the inventory for the 19 panels, because the ATWR 2022, which is in fact will not be the most recent ATWR when the plan change request comes in, because ATWR 2023 is supposed to be coming out in January of 2024. But anyway, the point of all that is, again, I think there's a disconnect between what they're proposing in terms of a lot of aspects, including both the PA and the barriers and the inventory, versus what they're doing. So that again, from a public standpoint, that creates a very clear disconnect. We're doing something with 12 panels, and then what's the plan for the other 7 panels in the future? This seems like a very piecemeal kind of approach, which a lot of people, including a number of people on this call, have been raising concerns about for a number of years, in terms of how DOE's gone about addressing the WIPP permit. So That's another issue I have. So let me stop there, because thank you for not putting a time frame on me, Ray. I have some more I might say, but since there are 35 other people on who may have something to say, let me stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Yeah, we will, circle back around. We just, appreciate that, folks, if, you want to come on video and ask a question, that, you appreciate others' time as well, that want to ask questions. So I will look in the chat again. Is there anybody that has additional questions at this time? Yeah, Joni, I see your hand raised. Let me go ahead and unmute you. Sorry.
Oh, whoops. Hi,
there you go.
Ray.
Hi, Joni.
Hi. Hi. It's a busy time. So, what information has DOE provided about geology, about groundwater flows from drilling Shaft 5? And what part of that information, or how will that information be incorporated into the PCR? I can explain a little bit further in terms of construction on the west side, problems with water in the waste hoist shaft that runs down the side. Are there any experiences with water running down Shaft 5 at this point? And what is the expectation for a period? Another question is about, we want to understand what's happening with the 19 panels, as Don explained, and I don't want to repeat, but basically, what's the plan? Because the people of New Mexico have been subject to this piecemeal sleight of hand methodology that DOE has been using for the last couple of years. Those are my questions right now. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Joni. DOE, do you, Andy or Michael, do you want to have somebody address those at this time?
Sure. Michael, you have anything? I can jump in right here, or I don't think we have any one from Sandia that might want to address this, but I can start with the impact of what information has been included on the shaft. Shaft 5 has been undergoing construction for a couple years. An important component of the Shaft 5 construction was mapping of the shaft to ensure, or to at least to identify whether there were any changes in the stratigraphy or the general form of the material over there from the rest of the shafts. Dennis Powers and Bob Holt who have mapped all the shafts of WIPP, has mapped Shaft 5. The report is not available yet, but they have concluded that there is no difference in the stratigraphy from Shaft 5, between Shaft 5 and the other shafts, except a slight change in the elevation of the marker beds. This is one of the reasons why the new rooms or the panels are slightly higher, because we sort of we basically drill or bolt into the marker bed that is now slightly higher, so the rooms are higher. But in terms of geology and hydrology, the shaft is exactly the same as other shafts. We do get some seepage from the Culebra aquifer, which is above the repository. This is no different than what we've seen in the other shafts. There will be engineering practices put in place to manage this seepage. We don't expect it to affect post-closure performance. During the operational phase, there will be mechanisms put in place to deal with this. I think that was mainly what you asked, and Shaft 5 has been incorporated into all the performance assessment analyses as we have done in the past. So the PCR for the replacement panels does take into account the new shaft 5.
Thank you, Andy. And, we did note, Joni, you did ask in your second question about the 19 panels, and Don, go ahead.
Yeah. So the 19 panels, I think we need to take a step back a little bit. We have a rod that was issued for 6 metric tons. We have an amended rod that was issued for 7.1 metric tons. And those 13.1 metric tons is the waste, the inventory that we're looking to deal with the replacement panels. There is additional waste that might be coming. There's not a record of decision, so we can't very well account for it. We have Bill McEnroy, who is our inventory specialist, on if he wants to step in and make a point about this. But we are asking for 2 panels basically to deal with lost capacity. The 19 panel configuration is a regulatory requirement. DOE has to provide our best guess of what the configuration of the repository will look like at the time of closure. It will certainly not have 12 panels because we know, as we said earlier, there's probably a lot more waste. There's more waste that will be needed to meet the requirement, the limits of the Land Withdrawal Act that specifies the amount of waste that we can dispose of. So these panels are for 2. The replacement panels are to deal with inventory that has been approved in the record of decision for surplus plutonium, etc. Bill, I don't know if you want to add anything to that in terms of inventory.
You covered that quite well. The only thing I would say, and it really comes off from one of Don's questions, is he stated that the inventory wouldn't be from the 22 report wouldn't be the same as the report that's coming out here maybe in January or future reports. And that's the way it's always been from day one of WIPP, is the sites do the best estimate of what they think they'll have. And many of these wastes have to go through a record of decision, but a lot of this waste does also fall out as low level. So that's why EPA asked us years ago to start producing an annual report so we could keep track of what the inventory was doing. But as far as the surplus plutonium, I think you hit that on the head there, Anderson, on the 13.1.
All right. Thank you both, Andy and Bill. I wanted to get to Gail. I saw that you raised your hand. I'll go ahead and there was a question in the chat from Roger Nelson to everybody. Does the RPPCR include plans for sealing shaft 5 at final closure in the same way as was proposed for shaft 1 through 4 in the original 1996 CCA? I think this is for DOE.
Yes, as I said, we put a lot of effort into determining whether there were any differences between shaft 5 and the other 4 shafts, which might affect the shaft sealing, the approved sealing technology for the shafts. So the first thing, we did a core hole before we started the construction of the shaft to make sure that there were no surprises. And as I said, the stratigraphy is exactly the same. The shaft sealing technology has a lot to do with the stratigraphy, even for closure of plug-in and abandoning of wells on the NMED's requirements. And with the stratigraphy being exactly the same, we don't expect any change in the sealing technology. There's been some questions about the fact that the shaft is bigger than the other shafts, and we have done numerical calculations to show that the increase in the size of the shaft will not affect the performance of the seal.
Thank you, Andy. I will go ahead and Gail Seidel, if you wanted to go ahead and ask your question, I will go ahead and, yeah, there you go.
Thanks. And thanks for giving us this opportunity. I guess first I want to say thank you to Mr. Ward for saying they need to step back from the 19 panels, because my understanding of the current permit is 12 panels is it. And as a citizen of New Mexico, we were promised certain things by the DOE and the EPA. And I hope that you will hold EPA. I hope you will hold the DOE's feet to the fire, that they maintain their promises to the people of New Mexico. For one, also I want to ask, in the presentation today, I didn't notice anything about earthquake and the increased drilling in the Permian Basin where WIPP is located and the effects of that. I know they did mention drilling, but they didn't mention any earthquake activity, which we're seeing an increase in that area, mostly due to the fracking of the area and other drilling. So I'd like a little more clarification on that. And just a reminder to the DOE that WIPP is a pilot plant, a practice plant. It is not to be the sole repository for all of the waste. And I would like to hear in their requests what they're doing, and also this relates to the new permit, what they're doing to find other repositories. This whole 19 panels is just way beyond what we were promised. We were also promised that there would be no surplus plutonium in WIPP, and that WIPP was only for legacy waste, so not new pit production. So all of that, I guess, a lot of questions there for me about this ongoing piecemeal expansion, clear expansion beyond what we were promised here in the state. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Gail. DOE, did you want to, I know, Gail had several questions there and comments. Is there anything there that you could address now, potentially, like the first related to the drilling and the earthquake activity?
Sure, I can take a stab at that. We have some other experts on the call that I will lean to in a couple seconds. But thanks for the question. If you look at 40 CFR 194.15 about what should be contained in recertification applications and these types of changes, it's pretty clear we have to include any new or additional information on geological, geophysical, geochemical, hydrologic, everything. So this application will include any new information that has been collected since the last recertification decision. We will submit this information. The EPA, it's their mandate to determine whether it's a significant change. We don't tell them it's not a significant change. We provide all the information. They decide if it's a significant change or not. In terms of earthquakes, there's a lot of interest in earthquakes in the Permian Basin. The earthquakes are, it seems from what the literature is saying, are mostly due to saltwater disposal. The state has pretty straightforward or very clear regulations now about, I know they've put some limits onto the depth disposal for saltwater. We have saltwater disposal wells around WIPP that we monitor the induced seismic activity that is related to earthquakes. But the important thing to note is that all of these earthquakes are very low magnitude relative to the design requirements of the WIPP facility. The effect of earthquakes and induced seismicity has been assessed. Not induced seismicity. The effect of earthquakes has been assessed in our FEPS, features and events and processes, that determines what goes into the model for consideration in terms of performance. And we expect that with the increased occurrence of these induced seismic events, they will be screened in the next go around to determine whether they should be considered or not. I don't know if Ross Kirkus is on, but Ross Kirkus is the keeper of the FEP, so to speak, and he could probably talk a little bit about that. Ross, are you on?
Yes, Andy, I'm here in the Sandia conference room.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy to expound on that. On the drilling rate, first of all, you did a great job explaining that. Our drilling rate is calculated based on the methodology prescribed by EPA. And to summarize that methodology, we basically look backwards 100 years, and we weren't even drilling, humans weren't drilling 100 years ago, but in the last few decades, the drilling has been at a very high rate, and we expect will continue at that rate and even rise until the resources have been depleted, which will happen at some point. But nonetheless, we take that rate and we assume it will happen at that same rate for the next 10,000 years. So that's an EPA standard. We feel it's very conservative to assume that humankind will continue to drill for a resource that's probably going to deplete in the near term, at least insofar as 10,000 year period is concerned. With regard to induced seismicity or seismicity of even natural causes, the design basis earthquake, as you mentioned, considered in the design of the WIPP, is of much greater magnitude than what we're seeing from the human-induced activity from water injection, water disposal. But it's also important to point out that mines, tunnels, and underground facilities don't see the same or don't see the same effects of ground shaking that surface facilities do. Mines are all around the world and have been for centuries. And in recent times, the universities and other scientific entities have studied the effects of underground facilities, studied the effects of earthquakes on underground facilities, because many countries depend highly on mining as a sole product. So we care deeply about what would happen to WIPP, and it's known that ground shaking and seismic activity has a much reduced effect on mines and facilities at depth below the ground surface. So we screen that out for the future. For the next 10,000 years, we don't see any kind of earthquakes that are going to disrupt the WIPP. The WIPP was chosen in an area that is, relatively speaking, seismically inactive, other than this recent surge in induced seismicity. Once this surge in oil activity comes and goes, we expect that to subside, but even if it doesn't, it has no effect on the underground facility. And another characteristic of the salt that WIPP is sited in is the ability to self-heal. So fractures are induced as we mine, but over time those fractures heal. And the same thing would happen in the case of some seismic activity that actually was strong enough to damage the salt.
Thank you, Ross and Andy. There is a follow-up question to this.
Oh yeah, I'm seeing, is this the one from Jenny?
Yeah, what's the maximum seismic event that is possible at WIPP?
That's a tricky question. We have a design basis, what is known as a design basis earthquake, for which the facility that was designed, which is 0.1 of a G. This is going to be very difficult to express in relation to how the laypersons understand earthquakes in terms of on the Richter scale. Again, Ross might be able to step in on this, but I do know it's not easy to compare the ground acceleration number 0.1 G versus a magnitude on the Richter scale as we understand it. But these things have been taken into consideration, and the induced seismic events are a fraction of what we're designed to withstand. Ross?
Yeah, Andy, there's a report that Waste Isolation Division, WIPP, wrote, I believe in 1994. It's referenced out of the CCA. It's called the Backfill Analysis Engineering Report, or the BEAR, and it lists the design basis earthquake. I think, it's only been 25 years ago, so I may get this wrong, but it's in the 5 to 5.5 magnitude. The strongest earthquake on record is over in West Texas, and it's about 130 to 150 miles from here. And I believe it was in the 1930s, and it was a 5.6. And so that maximum recorded earthquake was factored in to the discussion that's presented in the background or backfill analysis engineering report.
Thanks, Ross.
Thank you, Ross. I don't see any other questions in the chat at this time. Is there anybody else that would like to comment? Scott, I see you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Ray. My name is Scott Kovac with Nuclear Watch New Mexico. And I just had a question concerning the volume of record. What impact did the volume of record have on this plan change request, if any?
I will turn that over to DOE again.
Michael, you want to take that?
That's probably as much a Sandia question from the performance aspect, but given that my understanding of the performance assessment is that it's always been based upon 6.2 million cubic feet of waste, that the volume of record change hasn't affected that, and that remains the current, if you would, the model is basically the same, that hasn't had an impact. Now, as indicated by both presenters earlier, that 6.2 million cubic feet is not likely to fit in the panels that 11 and 12, which are designed to replace what had been intended for a disposal in 9 and 10. So they're looking at options to meet the Land Withdrawal Act and get the 6.2 million cubic feet into the ground.
But that's correct. The PA isn't concerned about volume. We look at inventory and basically scale whatever inventory is available up to the full repository. It doesn't differentiate between volume of record and other.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for your question. Thank you, Andy. Michael, still looking at the chat. Anyone else? I am not seeing anything. I will just I guess, reiterate at this time. Oh, Don? Don. There you go. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. I know you're trying to wrap up, Ray, and I'm not trying to prolong things. This is more of a suggestion probably for EPA at this point. I guess this is probably mostly for Ray. It would be very helpful on WIPP News if you, as soon as possible, post the various correspondence that have been referred to. I think I'm aware of them because I tend to ask you for certain things, but that doesn't necessarily make them available to everybody. I mean, you can come up with your own best way of doing it, but you may want to have, I mean, you're not doing a docket, et cetera, and that's not what I'm asking for, but a listing on the EPA website specifically for at least the last 2+ years of correspondence related to this PCR, so that it's all in one place and easily accessible for people. that would be helpful even before the PCR comes in. I appreciate what you said, that with the PCR and the various materials, that's all going to be there. But there have been things that have already been submitted, some of which have been referred to in the presentation. So if those could get posted soon by EPA, that would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Don, for that comment. I think that's very fair. I know that, when we did similar administrative changes with PCRs like MGO, I can definitely commit to, when we do have everything up there, we will have a running tally of all the documents related to the PCR, the new panels, so that everybody can just look in one place and find it there. Thank you for that comment.
And
Anything
if I could, can Andy or Michael or somebody from DOE give us any better estimate about when you're expecting the PCR to be submitted beyond early 2024?
Yeah, the current schedule is to submit it the second week of January. That is the current schedule, but there's some flexibility built into the schedule, or discussions with the EPA. Certainly, one of the reasons for having this meeting was to get feedback from the stakeholders so that we can address any stakeholder input before we submit the PCR. So again, I have to commend Tom and his group for arranging this meeting so that we can get feedback from you to determine whether we need to make any changes in our submission. But the second week of January 2024 is when we're planning to submit it.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, Joni, I did see your comment. Absolutely. I don't see any other hands raised or questions. So I just want to reiterate that there were 3 presentations today, one by EPA, 2 from DOE. We will get those posted on the website, as well as the recording for this Zoom meeting. I know that there was a slight interruption at the beginning of the meeting, but everything that was recorded, we will make sure that is posted as well for people to take a look at and listen to.
Joni has a question.
Oh, Joni, I see.
It looks like we have a fire alarm here, and I'm going to have to leave the building.
All right, Andy. Thank you.
Ray, I just had a question for, I guess, DOE and EPA with regard to these 14-foot ceilings in panels 11 and 12. And specifically, if they're 14 feet in height, you could stack 4 drums on top of each other. And I would like clarification if that is DOE's plan. It doesn't have to be, we don't need to talk about it right now because it's almost the end of the meeting, but that's an issue as well. And we addressed that with about panel 8, when the ceiling was also raised beyond what's been used in the WIPP site. So it just seems another way to fit more waste into WIPP without providing the proper notice and the proper public participation requirements.
Hey, Joni, this is Michael. I am not aware of any plans, but I wouldn't preclude it. But I would indicate that the permit will require modification, and we will be required to submit and go through a public process under probably both the PCR process with EPA and with the permit modification process with NMED if those plans are ever explored. I'm not aware of any plans, but that again, like you said, things change.
Yeah, and Michael, just to be clear, when I think we met over Zoom about the ceilings in panel 8, and they were 13 feet. I think that's right. Megan may correct me, but yeah, NMED did not know that the room was drilled to 13 feet. And Don may correct me as well, but that's an issue because it seems like that would be something that DOE would plan for. So thank you. Oh, and happy holidays, everybody.
Ray,
yeah.
Ray, may I interject a second? This is John
Sure,
Heaton. I just wanted to mention that when we were involved with getting the Holtec project licensed, the design of the project was for 1.3 Gs. When we saw the 5 on the Richter scale from the Mentone area, we asked New Mexico Tech to give us a correlation between 5 on the Richter scale and what it meant in G forces. And their response was 0.05 Gs. So if the design of WIPP is at 1, the 5 on the Richter scale would be 20 times what the return earthquake of 5 on the Richter scale would be. So this is the information that we received back. So it was significantly protective when you think about G forces, which are the acceleration forces that move through the geology. So at any rate, just to help people with that response.
Thank you, John. Anything else before we wrap up? Let's see anything else. All right. Again, everybody, thank you for joining. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. On behalf of the team here at EPA, we want to thank you, and we will continue to keep you guys up to date and abreast of developments. And like you said, like DOE mentioned, their anticipated submittal date is somewhere around the first 2 weeks of 2024. So we will keep you in the loop. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, DOE. Thank you, NFP.
The recording has stopped.